Yes, it's an international call. I know. I will. Yes, I will accept the charges. I will accept all the charges. Oh my gosh. That's right. We have an international call here today on Auntie, and I am thrilled, over the moon, that you are watching. I mean, I have this feeling that people are watching from all over the world. Nearly a dozen people have followed us and shared and liked Auntie, the podcast, because what we do is we talk to the movers, the shakers, the motivators, and the entrepreneurs. And this fella I have been friends with now for several years, which I can't even believe. And I have just a heart that is full to have him as our first international and our first Zoom guest here on Auntie, the fabulous Brock McGillis. Woo! Hi, Brock.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
I can put that telephone down now. All the international charges are, approved, and they will apply. I'll pay for all of this. Don't you worry.
Well, you're a rich and famous international drag superstar, and celebrity housewife.
All that jazz, I guess. Oh my gosh, who's the cutie patootie that's milling around back there? Let everybody know.
Moving. That's Iris. That's my puppy. She's supposed to be laying beside me, but she hasn't been in. I just moved, and she hasn't spent any time in the office. So now she's discovering it, which was, in hindsight, a bad idea to bring her in here. But I'm going to wrangle her. Iris, come here.
She'll be all right.
Lie down. Yeah, she'll be
enjoy.
fine.
She'll
Once
sit down.
I
She'll
get her to sit.
She'll be a part of the vibe.
Down
now,
or go.
Brock, we had
Hi.
our show that was on World of Wonder on Wow Presents called This Is Shit. And I have to say, we had such a marvelous time together. This was something that was really a passion project for both of us about really mental health awareness and positivity and sharing ways to get through struggles in life. And I just immediately connected with you. Now, I would like to have you share a bit of your previous career as a professional hockey player. Is it correct in saying that you were a goaltender?
I sure was.
I don't know what that is.
Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because it kept me close to the D and far away from the box.
There you go.
And if your audience knows hockey, they'll get that. If not, they're gonna be like, "What the hell is this guy talking about?"
Yeah. Well, then if they're from
it's funny if you know hockey.
It's funny if you know hockey, but it's also funny if you're from the queer community. Well, we can figure it out. Okay, but tell us about your background. You're a professional hockey player.
Yeah, so I played professional hockey. I started growing up. I'm from a small town in northern Ontario, and I grew up like a stereotypical Canadian kid playing hockey, and I got pretty good. And before I knew it, I was moving on to junior ranks, and then professionally in the U.S. and over in Europe. And I had a pretty good career. It's not where I thought it was going to be because I was struggling a lot. Because I don't know if you know this, but it's not easy to be a gay man in professional hockey, men's professional hockey. So I struggled immensely, and I, from a young age, was self-harming, incredibly depressed, drinking to numb, and it took me a while to come to terms with it, actually, until after my career was over. But it led to injuries, it led to self-harm, it led to depression, it led to different things that derailed my career, but also it turned me into the person I am today. So I'm pretty grateful for it.
Sometimes we've got to go through those moments to get to the place where we're at. And it's just, it takes everything in you to allow yourself to feel those things. Now, so you're I remember as a kid, the people that would bully me the most seemed to be those that were involved in sports. I mean, I
Was it
did
me?
my best. I did my best to go into football, and I picked up the ball and ran the wrong way. And I did my best to try to fit in. But a lot of the fellas that I felt most intimidated with were the hypermasculine athletes. So it was such an intrigue for me to get to know you and to know that you are, are you one of the first to come out in professional hockey?
So I'm sorry for bullying you in high school.
Not you specifically.
No, I'm just kidding. I didn't bully Mrs. Kasha Davis. Let's get that straight. After a while of struggling, when I retired from playing, I started working with athletes.
Right.
And I kept hiding my sexuality from them because I was afraid that if they knew, they wouldn't want to work with me. And as my businesses grew, I was like, well, it's my living and I employ people and there's too much at stake for me to come out to them. And one day I got a phone call from a hockey mom. And working with about 100 players a day meant a lot of phone calls from hockey parents. Hockey parents are a unique breed of human. They're fascinating. It's kind of like dance moms, but like spending 5 times the amount of money and just being very intense. So I'd get a lot of calls from parents, but this mom calls me and she says, Brock, I want to set you up on a date. And I said, what's her name? And she said, Steve.
Oh.
And I came to find out that all my athletes knew I was gay. And at first I panicked, but then I thought, like, cool, all these hockey bros, to your point, the hypermasculine, possibly bullies, different things, knowing gay and choose to work with me. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I thought about coming out to them, but then I decided to do a little sociology experiment and observe their behaviors, kind of like animals in the wild, hockey players in their natural habitat. So I realized something. They know I'm gay, but they don't know that I know that they know that I'm gay.
There you go.
So I started to observe their behaviors. I started to notice anytime they'd say something homophobic, they'd apologize to me. And then I started thinking, cool, maybe we're creating a shift, or maybe they just apologize to me. And then one day I wasn't there. I had some athletes working with a sprint coach on a track. And at the end of a workout, he told them they had 10 more sprints. The younger player said, this is so gay. One of the older players said, we don't say that here. Give me 50 push-ups.
Oh.
And the younger player said, you're right. And that was something my athletes adopted amongst themselves and then used their influence to bring it to their peers, to their friends, everywhere they went. And then people I didn't even know were doing push-ups whenever they'd say something homophobic. And that was kind of the catalyst to me deciding to come out. And I came out in November 2016. Because of that and a few things, Pulse had just happened, some oppression I went through within the sport and a couple other things. And when I came out, I was the first openly gay men's professional hockey player, which is pretty wild and surreal to think about and absurd. But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, so for a little bit of clarification, so you're coaching kids, players, hundreds of them, and you're transitioning from being on the team and professional sports to coaching, and still in the closet. And you're in this environment. And from our previous conversations, you've told me that a lot of the, what is it called? Barking or where you're
chirping.
You're chirping.
I
barking.
mean, we could call it barking. I'm going to start barking at people.
So the chirping is meant for, I guess, your intimidation and for just the other team. Is that correct?
I kind of think chirping is very similar to drag queens reading.
Okay.
I think those worlds are very similar in the sense that there's a type of reading that is for other drag queens that you're friends with, right?
Right.
And in the dressing room, whatever. But then there's also either an aggressiveness or defensiveness that happens out in the bars or wherever where people get read for, and for that queen, it might be a defense mechanism or a way to assert themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing happens in sports. I actually find drag and sport to be very similar in a lot of respects. I know, isn't that wild? But so I think players will chirp their teammates, which is essentially reading in the locker room as a playful banter and bonding mechanism. But then they'll also chirp on the court or ice or field
Right.
to their opponents as an intimidation or psychological type thing. So like queens in a pageant probably chirp each other.
Right.
They read each other, and it might be a way to get in their head, right? So there's different, there's like, it's really similar and interesting.
It is very interesting. Well, it's all a matter of different types of teams. I mean, this reminds me of theater, of different aspects of where you gather people together. But I get very excited. I get very encouraged. I get very motivated when I hear someone within professional, sports ball, sports hockey, all these different things, having the courage and the guts to come out, because I believe that there's another level of hypermasculinity, of competitiveness, and somehow it is perceived that it's a weakness. So I get very excited to hear people coming out who are professionals in the sport, because it's that representation matters so much, based on what you had just shared, that there were many years of self-harm and difficult times where you were isolating and just, feeling as though you didn't belong in something that you were so passionate about, not just passionate for yourself to be a part of a team, but to help others and teach others. How did you take that coming out moment and begin to share it? You began to share it with so many people. And what are the ways that you were encouraging these other players and I say kids, but our youth in changing and making that shift?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I came out, the goal was I had experienced some oppression in the sport, and I thought, if I'm out, then, if anyone is being homophobic or being oppressive in any way, they can't do that without it being incredibly overt at that point. So the goal of coming out was to empower myself and disarm them. They can't use my sexuality against me anymore, because now everybody knows. Now it's on the table. So now what? And I also thought it would help some people. I couldn't imagine what would happen next. Like that first day alone, I received over 10,000 messages from people all over the world, and it was a wild ride, and the media and speaking. And before I knew it, I was speaking at schools, events, corporation sports teams. I just finished a tour. I went to 100 hockey teams in 100 days across Canada.
Well, slow down. First and foremost, you're getting these messages, and then you're not somebody who normally goes and speaks at schools or on the news to that degree. So you're having this opportunity to share yourself so openly and vividly. And what does that feel like?
It was honestly overwhelming at first. There's no manual or guidebook. Like, not very many people have walked in my shoes, essentially, right, within the sports landscape. So, it's probably like what I feel like when you get on Drag Race and all of a sudden you get, from a local queen to hundreds of thousands of followers. Like, it's, obviously mine wasn't a scale of hundreds of thousands, but like all of a sudden you're getting all this national, international attention that I wasn't equipped for. Like, nobody gave me a manual, a guidebook. It was just one day I'm, hockey guy in Sudbury, Ontario. The next day I'm like on international news doing press and different things. And
I have to
I
stop.
think the hardest
I have to tell you and tell the listeners, Sudbury, Ontario is where you were.
I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming.
And I worked for a company called Dial America, and I was asked to open an office in Sudbury. And it was one of the things that we connected early on. I was like, are you kidding me? Of anywhere in Canada, Sudbury. And this is like very small town, right? Sudbury,
Yeah, but 100,000 people, 4 hours north of Toronto. Like
Right.
it's middle
And
of
my
nowhere.
bosses were like, "Oh, you're going to be so close to Toronto, you can go out there every night or on the weekends." I was like, "Okay." It we flew into Toronto and then we took a tiny little plane to Sudbury. So that makes even a bigger difference. I mean, it's essentially a very, very, very small town that you're also coming out in. You're getting this international recognition and attention. Was most of it supportive?
I would say from messages, press, I would say almost all, if not all, has been like, it's been even like some like really right-wing newspapers write positive stories about me. It's very strange. Um, and I would say the messages I received were predominantly, I would say 90% were positive and about 10% were people that were struggling themselves. There was very few negative ones in terms of about me. Those came later as I started finding my voice. People don't always love that, right? So then I would get the death threats and all that fun stuff. But at that point, it was all pretty positive. And then after the press, I started getting calls to speak.
Yes.
First it was a high school, and then a corporate, and then a this, and then a that. And then before I knew it, I was traveling and I was like on the road. And that started in early 2017. And now, like by 2019, I was shutting down my hockey businesses, moving to Toronto full time. So I had an international airport, and now it's like my career.
Yes. And when you're speaking, are you essentially sharing your story and your hopes for the future?
What I try and do is humanize the lived experience of a gay man in these spaces. And my story isn't something, like, yeah, it's a little unique, but I've had hundreds, if not more, people come to me that grew up in sport and experienced depression and struggled the way I did. So I think, the stories are fairly similar in that sense. I just happen to make it a little further. And then from there, my goal is to show them how we can all be shift makers, and we can all create shifts in this world, and big or small, they have a ripple effect. And those ripple effects, you'll never know the true impact of the shift you created. And pick the topic. Yeah, I'm talking about the LGBTQ+, but racism, homophobia, misogyny, ableism, mental health, bullying, the environment, doesn't matter what it is. There's a ripple effect to those things, something so small. One hockey player in Sudbury, Ontario, in like 2015, looked at another hockey player and said, "We don't say that here, give me 50 push-ups."
Right.
That had a ripple effect. That guy doesn't know the true impact he's had. Because of him, I realized I could create shifts. Because of him, it's part of the reason why I came out. Thousands of people have come to me who've struggled over the years. In some cases, in life or death situations, whether it's at schools or different places. And he's essentially saved lives.
Yes.
Those ripple effects. And so then I teach them how they can create shifts through humanizing issues, putting faces to it. And my goal, like, I'll be in a room and yeah, there might be a few queer people in the room, but it's predominantly a straight room.
Right.
So traditionally, like, I'll go into some spaces and then I do a whole different thing for like a queer specific space. But if I'm speaking to a straight room, I'm focused on that 80, 90% of the room. And how because I don't think the onus should be on us to create a welcoming environment for us to just exist. Like, that's not fair. So for me, it's them, how they can create shifts, how they can make it. And also the queer people in the room can create shifts as well. But, how we can create more welcoming spaces and the environment we create, humanizing issues, breaking conformity, all leads to safer spaces for everyone. The more we can bring ourselves, our full selves, I have a saying, normal doesn't exist. And I'll look around the room and be like, there's different hair colors, eye colors, skin colors, body shapes and sizes. Each and every one of you have different goals, dreams, ambitions. You all have different thoughts going through your mind at this exact same moment. All of you, all of us, we're all a bunch of weirdos. And that's a beautiful thing. And the sooner each person embraces their weirdness, the less likely they are to judge anyone else for theirs. And then beyond that, corporate culture has done studies now and shown that the more you bring yourself, your full self with you to work, so essentially your weirdness,
right,
the happier you're going to be. And the happier you are and the more you can be yourself in those spaces, the more productive you are. So pick the career, drag, accountant, doesn't matter, teacher, athlete. The more we can do that, the better it's going to be. So that's sort of my goal in doing it, is having them recognize impact of their language, behaviors, attitudes, while also rallying them to create shifts in this world to make it a little bit better for everybody.
And I love that. And that's really the essence of what this podcast is about, is recognizing movers, shakers, motivators, entrepreneurs. Those listening might have the idea or the initiative to do something like this. You took your personal story and began to share it, and it began to be shared, but you said, okay, I could just stop. I don't have to accept going to speak at a school. I don't have to accept speaking with a company or these teams. But you chose to continue to share, and that is one of the things that I've always been like, oh my gosh, I learned so much from you in that respect, because we've been back and forth on different issues, and we had a lot of time to talk during COVID and being stuck at home. And in that time, you began to dream, and you have talked to me so much about this goal about getting out and visiting 100 teams, schools. Tell us about this dream. Tell us about what you accomplished. You made it happen. You had been talking about this at a time when we weren't able to necessarily travel and do things with COVID, but then it was something that you kept saying, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Tell us what it is and what you accomplished.
Before I say it, I'm going to say this is something that, like, everyone thinks everything happens overnight. And to your point, it's something I've been talking about for 3 or 4 years before it came to fruition. And I just kept manifesting it. I knew it would happen. It was just a matter of when. And I heard something last night, and I thought of you because I thought you'd appreciate this. It was random. It was on YouTube, and I was laying in bed, and I heard somebody say, "No is only in that moment. It's temporary." And I went, wow. And sometimes I take no's personally. But in reality, it's in that moment. It's not right in that moment. Doesn't mean it's not right. Doesn't mean it's not right forever. Just means that the timing isn't right in that moment with those people. So this is something that took years. I mean, I probably started thinking about it pre-COVID, and it took almost 4 or 5 years to come to fruition. But the goal was to go to 100 hockey teams in 100 days across Canada. And I thought I wanted to do something that could help shift the culture. I wasn't sure if I did in schools or sports teams. Hockey has such a major influence on Canadian culture in different parts of the United States that I thought, well, maybe we start in hockey because it's a little catchier. It'll get more attention. Sponsors may be more driven that can't be in schools to be involved. And ultimately, if they're influencing the schools anyway, what's the difference? So I just said, let's make this happen. And we did. And I just finished the tour where for 100 days, I was traveling across Canada. I had 100 gigs, 100 teams in 100 days. It was unbelievable. I realized about midway through that I'm a masochist because I put myself through hell.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, my days would start. I was doing press in every stop every single day. So I'd start usually, I was up at 5:30 in studio somewhere doing press all day, then start speaking at night. And even if I was in a city, let's say I was in Vancouver, well, nobody's playing hockey right downtown Vancouver. So you're driving to the surrounding regions, and I'd be driving an hour and a half each way and stopping, talking 2-3 teams sometimes a night. And I'd get home at midnight. I'd get back to a hotel at midnight, eat dinner, and start again the next day, 5:30.
And do your face mask. Well, what's great is if
always
your face mask. But if you follow your social media, you're able to see this this journey. And I think that was brilliant because this can become a documentary. There is a culture shift happening with this type of passion, initiative, drive, and just the genuine vulnerability of sharing your story. Tell us a little bit about what kind of reaction you would get when you were speaking to these players.
Funny enough, we actually named it the Culture Shift Tour. So, yeah. And with the goal of creating shift makers, right? The reaction, I think people went in a little trepidatious. They were a little apprehensive initially because they probably assumed, I think they're used to hearing about social issues and being talked at and told what to do. And I don't think it works. I really don't. I think we create barriers to communication. We don't meet people where they're at. We don't take into account, nothing in this world is black and white. It's all gray. There's nuance. There's the environments they've grown up in, the exposure they've had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much that we have to take into consideration that we don't. And then we rip on people who get something wrong. And it's like, well, why don't we meet them where they're at and help them evolve? And yeah, it takes a little more time, and yeah, it takes a little more patience, but it's far more effective. So I'd go in the rooms and I think they were expecting me to tell them they were all homophobic bigots and blah, 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 blah in every room. And then I go in and I would started off every single one of them with the same first two questions. Who here knows somebody who identifies part of the LGBTQ plus community? At least 90% of the hands would go up.
Right.
Then the next one would be, who here has used homophobic language? Maybe one hand goes up, sometimes none, and they're looking at each other. And I'm like, well, either this is the most progressive hockey locker room I've ever been in my life, or you're lying. And then I tell them, I say, there's no judgment here.
Right.
We're here to talk, we're here to grow, we're here to learn together. And I put my hand up. And then when I put my hand up, all the hands in the room go up. But then it's an opportunity to have them critically think. So then I follow it up with, why didn't you put your hands up? And then some of the answers are like, well, we were afraid we were going to get in trouble. Because they're used to people coming in and telling them or seeing on social, telling them how they should act and ripping them for not, or at school or wherever else. And I'm like, okay, why did you think you would get into trouble? Well, because it's bad and it's wrong. I said, okay, so we can admit, and we're all aware of right from wrong.
Right.
And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, if we can start there, we can evolve. If you know what you're saying, the language you're using, et cetera, is wrong, then we can evolve it. If you know bullying's wrong, if you know harassment's wrong, if you know racism, homophobia, misogyny, ableism is wrong, then we can evolve it. We just got to give them the tools.
Right.
People want to evolve, and stories along the way, though. Like I had a mom, Kasha, come up to me or email me in British Columbia and say, my son's best friend just heard you speak. And he came to my house and he sat me down to tell me all about it. It's a 16-year-old hockey bro telling his best friend's mom. And he said that I changed the way he saw the world and he thinks I changed his life.
Oh my gosh.
Like this happened across the country.
That is huge. And again, it could be their personal path, a sibling, a friend, a parent, whoever, and then they're able to navigate with kindness. Ultimately, when I continue to experience people who are using those slurs, I realize I used them to cover up my insecurities, not understanding myself, and trying to fit in. So by having this tour, by making these types of opportunities accessible for the players, the students, the teams, we're continuing to allow conversations like that specific conversation. I call it the dinner table conversation where Uncle whoever comes in and says something. And now they're armed with information to be able to change the direction of that conversation. Because the way I look at it, in this world, we all have different ways of expressing ourselves. And ultimately, we try to be so unique, but we're probably more similar. And our stories, say from RuPaul's Drag Race, of these exaggerated drag queens, people enjoy watching it because of the moments where there's the tender, honest emotions and the struggles that we can say, I can relate to that. I don't necessarily choose to wear a gray wig and glasses, this, that, and the other, but I identify with the pain. I identify with the overthinking, the self-harm, etc. And so that opportunity to have that expressed is just truly life-saving. And I'm so proud of you for this. Now, what could possibly be, what are you manifesting next? What's on the agenda besides a break?
To your point, though, I'd have kids come up to me at high school as queer kids, and they'd be like artsy queer kids, and I'm like a jock bro. And they're like, I relate so much to what you said. And I'm like, well, I think you relate to the oppression versus me talking about being a womanizing hockey bro struggling with who I like, and but because our families aren't necessarily queer, we don't really have that relatability in our personal lives. And that's why we need shows like that. And we need people like you or myself and others who are willing to be those spaces for those people, because there are people struggling in our community significantly, and outside our community too, that need support and don't have it. And it's really sad. What am I manifesting next? Year 2. I'm not sure if I want to do 150 or 200 teams in Canada.
Whoa.
And I want to do a US tour as well.
You've talked about the US tour as well, and I think that's amazing too. Well,
manifesting
now,
that.
When you talk about 100, I mean, I don't know how many teams there are. Would you go back to other teams again, or are there 100 teams that you didn't hit?
I could have done. When we announced the tour, this is how receptive people were to this. Over 100 teams, additionally to what we had booked, reached out to have me in.
Oh, wow.
I could have done 500 teams this year.
That's incredible.
And just in minor hockey, like I work with professional teams, I work with other sports, and just in minor hockey, I could have done like 500 easily without
and you're
even...
you're continuing to catch the attention of the media. I've seen you do more and more interviews talking about it. And I think it's, again, I couldn't be more proud. It's life-saving. And I hope that you go international and continue. It doesn't only have to be hockey, right? I mean,
yeah. And I think it's time I push into the media a little more too. I think I'm manifesting that right now. I have a couple things in the works, maybe a show, maybe a pod that I'm not trying to get off the ground. It's going to get off the ground. It's just a matter of when it's right. And, you know me, I'm an idea person. I come up with 10 new show ideas and content things a week. And I have some pretty cool stuff on the back burner that it's just, when the time's right, it's going to happen. It's just, making sure the time's right. And when it does, I'll be ready for it.
Well, I thank you immensely, because we've had so many conversations about starting a podcast, about Mrs. Kasha Davis, you should do this. And we go back and forth and support each other. And we are idea makers, dream makers. We sit and think about how this can happen. And sometimes you just need to do it. And you did that with those 100 teams. And it really just impressed the crap out of me. And I know you're going to continue to do more. Take the time you just recently moved, enjoy your new space, and take some time for some self-care, because as we know, that's also very important. Our time is wrapping up. I mean, we talked about what you would want to manifest with regard to the idea of more teams and the idea of manifesting more media opportunities, podcasts, maybe your own talk show, these types of things. Where can people find you? What's the best way to find you?
You can find me on social media. It's Brock McGillis 33 on all the platforms.
Is it 33 so you can stay that age, or was that your number? Is it 33?
How dare you? I'm not even 33 yet. What are you talking about?
Lies.
No, it's I would say find me on TikTok, but I don't think you're allowed in your country anymore.
I don't even know. We're working on that.
Yeah.
We'll see at this point, maybe this afternoon.
Brock McGillis 33 on all platforms. And I just want to say, I appreciate you so much and the friendship we formed. And it was, maybe perceived as an unlikely duo, but I think we did a hell of a job with that show and helped some people. I had a kid reach out to me that saw that show, and it turned out he didn't know I was from Sudbury, but he was.
Right.
Isn't that weird? And he went through some struggles in his household, and I was able to help support, and it all came from that show. And I had so much fun with you on that, and it was such good work we did. I live by the motto that there's always time for Mrs. Kasha Davis.
Oh, well. And listen, the best is yet to come. You don't know what else we're going to do together. We have other plans. We're also two people who aren't afraid to reach out and say, hey, let's start this back up again. So we'll continue. And one thing we'll do is we'll laugh. So what I would love to do, I love my dad jokes. I can go first. I know you said you were going to pull one up on your electronic device there. And I think this one's quite a fun one. How much does a hipster weigh?
How much?
An Instagram. That's a good one. I'm wheezing. Okay. Did you find one?
It. Yeah. Kasha, did you get a haircut?
I didn't.
No, you got all the hairs cut.
Yes, I did. Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, let me tell you a personal story. So I'm bald under here, but I have been shaving my eyebrows for 10 years, and I just started growing them back. And so I am like in this whole new, like trying to learn makeup again, because it's a whole thing. You've got to glue them down and figure them out, and then they can't be too short because then they poke through the makeup. Oh my gosh. So I have eyebrows now. So I'll send you a picture after this. Okay. Why was the safari cat disqualified from the race?
Why?
Because he was a cheetah.
I got to tell you something about cheetah. There was one of our Olympians who won gold and the Summer Olympics, like the 100 meter or whatever. He ended up getting disqualified for cheating. And then he became the face of an energy drink company called Cheetah. And it was so funny.
He manifested that.
Yeah. Kasha, did I ever tell you I don't trust stairs?
No.
Yeah, they're always up to something.
That's a good one. 12 steps for me. Okay. Thank you, Brock. I will look forward to more dreaming, more chats, and more partnerships together. I know we've had a lot of different ideas, and there's more to come. But also, thank you all for listening, tuning in. Our first international guest. I mean, that's right, international celebrity housewife. And I even have international friends and entrepreneurs and motivators and movers and shakers. And I would like to remind you, no matter where you live, that there's always time for kindness.